Well, good morning, Kevin. It's lovely to see you. Thank you very much indeed for agreeing to do our podcast today. Always ask somebody, what have you had for breakfast and have you been for a morning jog, Kevin?
Morning jog. No, I haven't been for a morning jog. A morning drive.
Right.
Yeah, a nice bowl of cereal and then hop in the car for a little drive into Bristol.
And do you come into the office every day?
Most days, yeah, I'm here 3 or 4 days a week, or I'm out and about meeting people three or
Do you
four
think
days a
that'll
week.
change now that you've reached the elevated heights of senior traffic commissioner and you're going to be doing slightly different roles?
Yeah, it seems that way. I seem to spend a lot of my life on trains. A lot of my life travelling around, meeting operators, meeting the people that represent them, and finding out how their businesses run, which is good.
Okay. So, while we're on the subject of you being the new senior traffic commissioner, what made you apply? What made you want to be that senior traffic commissioner?
Well, I've been a traffic commissioner for 12 years. I've seen 13 years. And you'll know that because you appointed me all that time ago.
Well, I don't think it was me. I think it was Department for Transport.
Well, yeah, got a hand in it.
I did.
Um, and I've seen Richard's did a brilliant job leading us through some very difficult
He
times. He's,
did.
he's really professionalised the bench, as he likes to call it. Um, and I think now maybe is the time for maybe the next phase, which is maybe to make it slightly more practical, a bit more understandable for people.
Okay, so before we talk about that, can I just talk about the public perception of traffic commissioners? There are some very stern-looking photographs of the traffic commissioners. Um, and of course, traffic commissioners aren't always stern. I sort of jokingly say I'm kind to children and small animals. How are you going to get the message over to operators about who is Kevin Rooney as a person, as well as the senior traffic commissioner with your very stern-looking photograph?
Well, we have to have a stern-looking photograph because sometimes we have to do stern things. But most of the time, we are humans. We do get out and about. We like to meet operators. We like to spend time with operators, understanding their businesses, and we speak as much as we can at as many events as possible. So come along and see us.
And also not just speaking, but listening to what operators
Absolutely.
have got to say. So, what do you think are the real challenges that operators are currently facing, whether it's PSV or HGV at the present time?
I think it's getting people into the industry, whether it's PSV or goods, whether they're drivers, whether they're route planners, schedulers, or probably the most difficult at the moment seems to be technicians that are
Yeah,
capable of dealing with modern vehicles
yeah, or vehicles at all.
or vehicles at all.
Okay, so before we talk about that specifically, I think you've been in post for 32 days or
2
31,
days,
32
yes.
days. What have you achieved in that time, STC Rooney?
Well, I haven't been able to sign any executive orders. I'm not Donald Trump, I'm afraid.
Oh, such a shame.
It is a shame. It is a shame. But what I've achieved in that time, and it's only 1 month into a fairly lengthy tenure, hopefully,
So,
is
what's your strategic view? What do you want to achieve?
what I want to do is spend the next 3 months through to, well, probably a bit longer, through to the end of the year, working with industry, working with operators, trying to understand what the issues are that are affecting them directly, and working with our staff and with the department and DVSA and looking at how we can make those issues a little bit easier. I don't want to reduce the standard of operator licensing at all, but I think there's a way you can make it easier to understand and easier to comply. And that's why we need to get out there and we need to talk to the operators that are doing this as a day job.
What's your overall view of the industry? There's always the 80-20 rule, isn't there? Like 80% of the freight is moved by 20% of the operators. You've got quite a polarized set of operators from the small, really good, high value family business through to the multinationals and the huge operators. How do you listen to all of them and then apply that to a piece of interpretation of legislation? It's a real challenge.
It is a massive challenge, as you say. We go from people running several thousand vehicles, very complex systems, global financial position systems, to one man with one vehicle that he uses to go to um, move his sheep around
Or I,
Devon
or I could
occasionally.
say, Kevin, one woman and one vehicle if
You
we want
could.
to be diverse.
Oh,
Just
yeah, it would be
teasing you.
nice to be diverse, and it would be nice to see more women in the industry. Unfortunately, whenever I go to events to talk, I was at one recently, a fleet engineer event. I walked into the room, and there were some women in there. There was out of 150 people in the room, there might have been 10 women in there. And the other thing that was very noticeable, given that this was a national event representing Great Britain, was that they were all white faces, and I don't know why that is. because there are people from all sorts of backgrounds in the industry. But when I go to meet the representative bodies, it's really rare to find anyone other than people of an age probably similar to me.
Or me, and you're
I,
substantially younger than I
I
am.
couldn't possibly say, Beverley.
Well, I don't mind telling the great British public or our two listeners that I'm, official retirement age this year. Um, but I've still got a few years left in me, or a few months, depending on, how I feel. And there are people that still want to work and have a lot to contribute
Mm,
because of their knowledge, their expertise, their experience. But I'm not going to be relevant to somebody that's 30 years of age coming into the industry. So it's how you balance that, isn't it?
it is, yeah. And we need to attract more young people into the industry, and we've got um, programs such as Generation Logistics, which is sort of cross industry, which is doing some of that. But I'm not seeing that really providing sort of modern technicians able to deal with alternative fuel vehicles, for example. They're just not there at the moment.
So you're known in the industry, if I may say, as somebody that knows how vehicles work. I don't profess to. I know how an Act of Parliament might work, but I don't really know how a vehicle works. But I do know how to check the tyres, and I do know how to make sure that there's water and all those things. We were talking just before the discussion now to two younger people, aged 27 and 31, and saying, "Do you know how to do that?" And they say, "No, I rely on my vehicle to put up a warning light, and then I'll do something about it." Very reactive, not proactive. Do you find that that's indicative of the younger people that are working in the industry, that the vehicles are telling them what needs to be done rather than them being proactive?
It's probably indicative of the younger people that aren't working in the industry. The ones that are probably tend to be slightly more proactive, more interested in how the vehicle works and why it does what it does. Certainly the technicians, obviously, and I think younger drivers want to know how it all fits together. But they're the few that are in the industry at the moment. We need more people in the industry, and they're the ones that probably do just rely on that warning light coming up saying low tyre pressure. Um,
Or even worse, I'll take the bulb out. That warning light's come up on the dashboard about the ABS. It's really annoying me. It's an intermittent fault. I'll just take the bulb out. And
mm,
obviously, I'm being a bit teasing, but I'm also making a really serious point.
yeah, but of course that person knows exactly what they're doing,
Yes,
and they're making a choice between taking a bulb out or spending a couple £100 fixing a safety system.
absolutely. So, how did you get to where you are today, Kevin? Tell us a little bit about the real Kevin Rooney, where you were born and brought up, what you did you go to university, etc.
Yeah, so I was born and brought up in South London.
Right.
Um, Mother was a nurse, father was a crane driver, and I was the first person in our family to go to university. So I went to Loughborough and did a degree in automotive engineering many years ago.
So, why did you want to do automotive engineering?
Well, when I was 16, I wanted to be a car mechanic.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, absolutely not. And I still spend quite a lot of my time being a car mechanic at the moment because my family have quite a lot of vehicles. Um, but then I was at a careers event at school one day and somebody said, well, why don't you think about university? You can get some A levels, you can give it a go. And it was quite alien.
So, what did you do your A levels in, Kevin?
Um, did pure maths, applied maths, physics, and design and
You
technology.
see, I always tell people you're really intelligent, and now you've just proved that you're really intelligent by doing such meaty, weighty subjects. So you do that, you go to Loughborough, which
Yeah,
has obviously got a great reputation for that sort of
yeah.
course. Did you enjoy university life?
I loved it. It was a great time. Yeah, absolutely great time. Part of the kart racing club, part of the motor club, did all sorts of events and things, and learnt a bit as well,
Just a little bit.
just a little bit. But it's not, and you have to keep up to date, of course, because when I was there, I remember doing my final year project on control systems for these new things called fuel injection systems, and we learned a lot about carburetors, which probably many of your listeners have no idea what they are. But yeah, vehicles have moved on, and you really do have to work hard to keep up to date with them.
You certainly do, and that's a big topic we can talk about later. So what did you do when you left university? You got this bright new world in front of you.
I got a nice job in London with the Department for Transport as a graduate mechanical engineer, and then I spent a year at the Transport, then it was called the Transport and Road Research Laboratory.
And what were you doing there?
I'd spent a year sitting in trucks, driving around a test track, measuring the road wear effects of heavy vehicle suspension, and out of that came a piece of legislation that allowed people an extra ton on air suspension, I think it was, but that was the research that allowed that.
And did that give you your love of commercial vehicles?
It got me interested in heavier vehicles. Yeah, until then, I'd only really been interested in cars and bikes, um,
Motorbikes,
motorbikes.
dangerous things, Kevin, dangerous.
Well, only because there's car drivers on the road trying to take you off them all the time.
Yeah, but also big and heavy to pick up if you fall
They
off
are,
them.
they're big and heavy to pick up when they fall over. Yeah.
Okay, so you develop an interest. So what do you do after you've done that? Didn't you? At what stage did you move to DVSA?
Um, so I went around all the departments, agencies. It was great. So I spent some time in London writing, helping write legislation, writing policy in the policy team there. Um, I spent some time in VCA, who do type approval of vehicles, and at the type approval centre at Nuneaton, at Myra, which was good fun. But then I joined, after a couple of years, I moved into a vehicle inspector, as it was then, still part of the
The VI, I remember it well.
Department for Transport, or Ministry of Transport, or whatever it was back in
The men from the
1988.
ministry is what some operators still talk
Indeed.
about.
And I spent quite a few months on the as a lane supervisor at Yedding Test
Oh,
Station.
did you? Okay.
Yeah, Yedding Goods Vehicle Test Station, just near Heathrow, which was an interesting job. Chance to get to know vehicles, get to inspect and understand them. And then I eventually moved down here to Bristol, where we are now, my beautiful office, my beautiful public inquiry room, um, and worked on the MOT, car MOT scheme for a while, and wrote the inspection manual for Class 5 vehicles and for Class 7 vehicles, which was large
Technical
prize.
stuff, Kevin.
Technical stuff, yeah.
But you rose up to become a director of DVSA?
I did eventually, yeah. I became the customer director, which was a new role. Chief exec was a guy called Stephen Tello.
I remember Stephen.
Yeah, it's very keen that customers, they pay the bills, they should have a real input into how we run our business, and so he created this role of customer director. Initially, it was PSV sector, and then I took on the whole business.
And you talked a moment ago about car MOTs.
Yeah.
Why do commercial vehicles on an operator's license have to have an MOT if every 6 weeks or 8 weeks or however many weeks it is, they have to have a full safety inspection, which has to be at least 6 weeks higher than the MOT standard? Wouldn't that be a really good thing to get rid of? Help bureaucracy or
Yeah.
reduce the burden on the operator?
Yeah, unfortunately, and it's sad to say it, we can't trust operators to do the job right. There is a set of statistics that DVSA provide that show that the prohibition rate for vehicles from the date of the last MOT drops after the MOT. Within 3 months, it's back to where it is for the rest of the year. The vehicles simply aren't maintained at MOT standard or above it all year round.
That's a really sweeping statement to make and a really interesting one. It's not one I've heard before. But doesn't that mean that the operator license regime isn't working?
It means we've still got work to do. And that is a very general statement. That's the vehicles opposite DVSA targeted at the roadside and pulled in
And they're going
for
to be the
prohibition.
worst ones.
Yeah, or obvious. There will be ones that are red rated on their OCRS.
But what about all the green? I wasn't anticipating going down this road, but if I can just ask you about it, all those operators, thousands and thousands of them, are green OCRS, got a really high first-time MOT pass rate, really low encounter rate, virtually no prohibitions, who are doing it right, who are operating their vehicles at above that 6 weeks. Are you basically saying it's not easy to distinguish who they are, and therefore you have to keep the MOT?
No, there's another. Actually, an MOT is the cheapest audit you can get on your maintenance systems.
Oh, I agree with that entirely.
And I think that's why you'd want to keep it, even if you do have a 99% first time pass rate.
Okay, okay, that's
Because it's,
interesting.
for 150 quid or whatever the fee is these days, you get an independent, totally independent view of how you presented that vehicle for MOT, having prepared it.
Okay, and just on this issue of MOT's general roadworthiness, one of the things we talk about on our courses is that I think, and you'll tell me if the figure's wrong, about 70% of defects found at the roadside are as a result of the driver having failed to having conducted an effective daily walk round check. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm not totally confident in that figure because it's done after the event as an
Yeah,
analysis of what the defects are, and it
yes,
includes tyre defects. And some tyre defects a driver should see, and some tyre defects, inside tyre of a twin fitment or something, they
difficult.
won't have seen. So it's probably a bit overstating, but generally the principle is right. Most prohibitions are avoidable if the driver had done a proper walk around check.
So how are you going to address that over the coming months and years in your new role?
I think One of the things that we need to work on is getting our profile higher with drivers.
Mm,
Um, we, as well as public inquiries with operators, we do driver conduct
yes,
hearings, as you well know, with drivers. And where an operator gets that prohibition, that has that lovely statement across the middle that says this prohibition indicates a failure of roadworthiness compliance, significant failure. That's what's known in the industry as an S-mark
mm.
prohibition. If that, the examiner will also say whether that's about routine maintenance or a driver issue. And if it's a driver issue, they're likely to find themselves in this route. And I think we need to get the message out to drivers that actually we expect more from professional drivers.
They have their part to
They've
play
got their
in
part to play.
roadworthiness.
The operators need to make sure they're properly trained and
Mm.
know how to inspect and have the opportunity and things like basics like a torch, somewhere to walk around it and not trying to carry out the inspection in a muddy yard where they can't inspect the tyres because they're covered in muck. Um, so they need to be helped, but they also need to know that there is actually the stick at the other end of it where if there's, the wheel falls off and it's down to the driver not checking his wheel nuts, then they're looking at losing their vocational entitlement.
Yeah, carrot and stick approach.
Yeah.
And it is, a massive responsibility being a commercial vehicle driver.
Mm,
Thankless task, not appreciated by the great British public.
no.
And let's not forget, thousands of them do it beautifully every day. Joan Aitken used to call it the invisibility of success,
Mm,
didn't she?
yeah.
It's those ones that don't do it properly. So just going back, you were talking before
Just
about,
on that point, I would just
yes,
like to say about drivers, and it's a
yes,
really good point you make about them. But you know, I deal with drivers, I deal with them with things that have gone wrong. But I mentioned earlier, I like bikes. I ride a motorbike, and when I'm driving down the M32 on my motorbike in the morning coming in,
do you come to work on your motorbike?
occasionally,
Oh, I love that.
occasionally,
Leave your leathers outside.
most of the time I have too much to carry and I have to turn up with a suit on, so it doesn't really work. But occasionally
Your
I
little
do.
sidecar with you.
And my file of papers. Um, the point is, when I come down filtering through traffic, it's very dangerous on a motorcycle, but that's why you ride a motorbike. Um, car drivers, as a motorcyclist, you're very, very wary of because they
Mm?
can wander all over the place and you go past and they're on their phone or they're doing whatever they're doing.
Yes.
A truck driver almost always will just move over and give you that little bit of space because they're looking, they're being attentive, they're professional, and you really can tell the difference that people driving trucks or buses or coaches for that matter are real professionals, and it's really the odd one here or there that get it wrong.
And it's lovely to hear you say that. And it sort of gives us a warm, rosy glow, doesn't it?
Mm,
That generally all's right with the world.
yeah,
And what we're talking about here is a tiny proportion or a small proportion of those that really can't be bothered.
yeah.
Um, what are the causes of non-compliance? A tiny proportion say, I'm going to go out today and deliberately do it
Mm.
wrong. There's all sorts of other factors which we haven't got time to
I mean, I
talk
haven't met
about.
any driver that's come in here yet and said, "I went out today to go and drive that truck into a bridge," for
Exactly.
example.
Oh, let's not talk about bridge strikes, Kevin. It means something'll happen. It's like, don't
Touch
mention
wood, touch wood.
don't mention bridge strikes. Well, we will come back to bridge strikes. So just before we go on to talk about some other things, you mentioned about commercial vehicle maintenance. We talked about the technicians, and you said there are challenges that face them. One of the things I know is very dear to your heart and mine in my old and in my current role is brake testing.
Mm,
And sometimes we still get operators who say to us, I didn't know you had to have laden roller brake tests at every safety inspection. Or the guide says you only have to have them 4 times a year. Or I can do a risk assessment. What's your really practical advice with your years of experience on both DVSA and as a traffic commissioner? What should operators be doing?
let's step back a bit first. What the operator needs to see is a declaration of roadworthiness signed by a competent technician,
Yeah,
somebody who knows what they're doing, hopefully is qualified, and can say that that vehicle is safe and meets the minimum requirements. And as you said earlier, and will still meet those minimum
that's the
requirements in
key.
6, 8, 12 weeks
Yeah.
time. And to be able to do that, they need to know that, and the law says every part of every braking system is working as intended, to paraphrase it. And if you're looking at a multi-axle vehicle, 4-axle tipper, the only way you can know as a technician that every brake is working properly is through a loaded roller brake test. There is simply no other way of knowing. And so, how can you possibly put your name to a declaration of roadworthiness unless you've done a loaded roller brake test? Either then, or if you've had access to one that's been done in the last fortnight. Um, and then the technician, the transport manager, needs to have confidence in the maintenance provider they've selected, needs to understand their qualifications and training so that they know that that declaration of roadworthiness is valid. But there's absolutely no way you can test an empty vehicle on using any form, whether it's dynamic brake test or roller brake test. Say a 32-ton vehicle empty will be maybe 15 tons, and then know it's going to stop
You're
when you
talking about lorries here. We'll
talk
come
about
on to
lorries.
buses and coaches separately.
Yeah, it is absolutely impossible unless you get into really technical things such
Mm,
as measuring air pressures and extrapolating, which
mm,
is really laboratory level,
mm,
way above what I'd expect a
mm.
workshop to do. And so I would say no technician should sign a declaration of roadworthiness unless they've got access to a loaded roller brake test.
Okay.
Or if that's not possible because of the nature of the vehicle makes it impractical, so maybe a petrol tanker or a particular type of livestock
Mm.
transporter, then they need to write down a risk assessment. The technician needs to do it saying what assessment they're going to carry out on the braking system, why they think that that braking system is going to be safe, and why they weren't able to do a load of roller brake tests. They need to sign it, and the transport manager or the operator needs to sign it as well
And understand it.
and understand it.
Okay. So that's a very long
It
answer.
was all
And
right.
it's no, it's a very good answer because it's very comprehensive and helps our listeners. But in terms of practical advice, are you saying that they should be doing a laden roller brake test at every safety
Yeah,
inspection?
absolutely.
Okay. What about this wonderful EBPMS, electronic braking performance management systems?
Yeah, that's been around for what, about 10 years now. I was involved at the outset with DVSA trying to write a standard for it. I think in relation to trailers, it's a long way forward on how trailers have been maintained, generally speaking. Um, I think it does offer a solution to operators so that they can find out what it does is indicate when the brake system has started to decline. It doesn't say what the problem is, which is why you still need your brake tester
Mm.
in some means. It just says this trailer isn't stopping as well as it was last week. There's something probably wrong with it. Um, and that's what we need is preventative maintenance system. It flags that up.
So can they do one or the other? Can operators do either laden roller brake test or EBPMS, or should they do both?
They can do one or the other. The issue comes that once EBPMS, I wish there were some shorter initials for it, but that once that flags that there's a defect, then you've got to work out how you work out what that defect is because all it says is I'm not stopping as well as I used to.
Okay. So before we have our little coffee break, can I just ask you about buses and coaches? Because of course I've always say jokingly it'd be much more fun if we could laden or load them up with loads of children and then put them over a roller brake tester.
It would definitely be fun.
It would be
It would be
fun.
fun. Yeah, it would
But
be
would it
fun.
give us any better indication of the braking capabilities of that coach or bus?
It might do. You got some particularly heavy children in there. Um,
Maybe
but
some rugby players.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's what you need a rugby team in there.
Okay. But in
Um,
the absence of a rugby team,
yeah, but the issue is that if you take a trailer, for example, an unladen weight of a triaxle trailer is probably about 7 or 8 tons, and when it's loaded, it's going to be, do the math quickly, 30 something tons. So you've got a loaded to unloaded,
yeah,
laden to unladen ratio about 5 to 1.
yeah.
You take a coach, an 18-ton coach, when it's empty, it's probably still 13 tons. So that ratio of laden to unladen is nothing like as dramatic. So the brake test you can do on an empty coach or an empty bus is far more useful in terms of saying whether or not the system's working.
So it's still effective.
It's still effective.
Well, do you know, I've learned something there, Kevin. I'll incorporate it in our courses now that I've learned that. So, maintenance contractors, in-house maintenance staff, vehicle maintenance units. How does an operator know, or how can they know that whoever they are, whether they're in-house, whether they're external, that they are fit for purpose, experienced, that their facilities are as they should be? Tell us all about the latest scheme.
Yeah. It's extremely difficult for an operator who doesn't require any technical skills because that's not their business to be able to assess a maintenance provider. Um, and it came home to me one day in this very room when I was chatting to a nice couple who were a scaffolding business. And
You
I,
like scaffolders,
I
don't
do
you,
like
Kevin?
scaffolders. I see a lot of scaffolders, a lot of scaffolders. And in fact, I'm meeting the Scaffolding Association very
Excellent.
soon. But I asked them about their maintenance provider and I asked them, what qualifications have they got? What facilities have they got? And the guy just turned back and said, well, I've got no idea. I put them on your application form and you approved them.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and the penny sort of dropped because, as you know, when somebody makes an application, we'll ask them all sorts of questions about their background and
Yes.
history and the operating centre and all sorts of stuff. But we just note what's said about the maintenance provider. And they say they're going to use, Joe down the road. We'll say Joe down the road. He must be
BB
sound.
commercials, no,
BB
no
commercials.
clue.
No clue. No clue. We don't do anything. And it really hit me. And then I was talking to a guy called Phil Lloyd at Logistics UK who'd done some work with their membership. And they'd done a survey of their members at one of their annual events. They do transport manager events. And these are people that are taking a day out to go to a conference about
Mm.
transport management. Um, and I think there was sort of something like 80 to 85% of them said they didn't feel competent to assess their maintenance providers.
Mm.
So we got talking across the industry, and Phil is retiring shortly.
He's a
Um,
good guy, Phil.
he's a good guy, put a lot of effort into getting the industry together, and it's taken us 2, might even be 3 years to get the scheme up and running and get it
Mm.
launched this year because we wanted everybody involved. So we've got RHA, Logistics UK, CPT representing the operators. We've got BVRLA for the rental fleet. We've got IRTE or SOE who
Yeah.
are actually going to run the scheme for us now. We've got everybody that we could think of, Department for Transport, TVSA, traffic commissioners, everyone together and everyone to agree a basic standard um, for workshops. And so we launched it at the CV show in April. It's quite straightforward standard. It hasn't yet got any measures of KPIs of output. It looks at the competence and qualifications of the technicians and the facilities available, and it rates maintenance providers from the bottom level that says qualified all the way through bronze, silver, gold to platinum. And that's to help operators select the right maintenance provider for them. And one of the things we're very clear about is we don't think every operator doesn't need a platinum
No, and they won't be able to.
provider, um, but they do need somebody who's qualified. So they've got a hole in the ground, a roof over their head, and they've got some qualifications.
What about those who say, particularly to me, "Look, love, I've been doing this 30 years, man and boy. I've never had any qualifications, but I can strip a set of brakes down, sort it out, and put it all back together again. I don't need a qualification." Are they going to be able to? They might be really good at what they do. Are they going to be able to come into the scheme?
They will have to get themselves a bit of a qualification, but IRTE have the ERTEC training scheme,
Yeah,
which is designed exactly for those sorts
yeah,
of individuals. So they have to do the inspection technician and the next level up called advanced technician.
yeah.
So they'll have to show to somebody that they are competent.
And I've been banging on about the ERTEC scheme forever.
Yeah, it's a brilliant scheme.
It
It
is.
is aimed at people that have come up on the tools, never gone to college,
Yeah,
but they can demonstrate but
competence.
competence. One of the big issues for us, and when I say us, I don't mean for traffic commissioners, I mean for the industry,
Yeah.
that group of people who put this together, is that you need two things as a technician. You need to be able to know how to fix something, but you need to know how to inspect a vehicle. And I think that's why the failure rate at MOT, where people might have had 2 or 3 days to prepare a vehicle, is still about 10%, just a bit under, I think now, because you need an inspection routine.
Mm.
You need to know how to inspect a vehicle, and that's what DVSA are trained to do, to inspect. And I did a basic inspection course 38 years ago or something. It was 2 weeks long.
DVSA used to deliver those courses, didn't they?
They did,
And now it's done by the private
yeah.
sector.
But you need to know how to
Mm.
inspect. And you need to have, a technician as an assistant to inspect. You need the facilities, and that's a big issue in actually finding the defect in the first place.
And I think that's one of the pieces of the jigsaw that's missing. I remember you asked very politely an operator to give an undertaking, and of course the answer is always yes,
Mhm.
to actually attend an inspection course, a practical
Yeah,
inspection course, so that they could improve the standards of maintenance.
yeah.
Maintenance being that sort of generic word for that. So hopefully people will register for the scheme. Is there a fee?
For the workshops, so it depends. There's 5 bands. The first two, it's an online application where you answer some questions, you upload some documents such as
Mm.
your training log, your qualifications, your calibration certificate, and the fee for that is £175,
Nothing, is it?
and that lasts you for 3 years. So it's absolutely it's £1 a week. It's nothing.
And is that done on the basis of 175, did you say?
Yeah,
What's a pound a week? Oh, you mean over the 3
over
years?
3
Over
years.
3 years. You see, you got pure maths
Yeah,
A
yeah.
level. I haven't. I've got maths O level, probably a
Mm.
scrape through. Very good value, and that's based on the size of the operation or just a one-off fee?
It's a one-off fee for the level of approval that they want,
Right.
for
Okay.
the level of
Yeah. Yeah.
certification that they want. If you want to go to the silver, gold, and platinum
More
level, then
expensive.
it's more. You have to find an independent auditor
Yeah.
that IRTA have approved who will audit your facilities.
Right. Okay.
Um, and I think those audits will depend on the size of the business, 600 to £1,000.
Right. So you are. It's still cheap,
It's
cheap as
still
chips,
really cheap.
and you're inexpensive and good value.
Yes.
And you're obviously promoting that. Your colleagues are
Yeah.
promoting that.
There will,
So
there will very shortly be a little a link to it on Vol on the maintenance provider page where you write down who your safety inspector is. It'll take you to the website and say,
that's really good
have
initiative.
you thought about using
Okay.
an MPRS? And in the fullness of time, if we get enough take up across the industry, then we might ask operators to write down the level of their maintenance provider.
Sounds like a plan, Kevin.
It is a plan.
So on the subject of vols, which has been with us, I think, 10 years.
Yeah, 2016.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, nearly 10 years. And on the subject of fees,
Mm,
I'm a new operator. I apply for a license for one vehicle, BB haulage, BB buses, and I pay, I don't know, threepence halfpenny in real money. I put my advert in the newspaper, which cost me £150 in real money. I have to satisfy the financial standing requirements, but I don't know. Rooney haulage, what's 500 vehicles, pays the same fee.
mm,
Are the fee levels appropriate? Are they fair? And if not, what are you able to do about it?
right. Well, the fee levels aren't appropriate because, as anyone that's got a business will know, we DVSA spend on our behalf £20 million a year running operator licensing, staff, IT, buildings, and the income from fees is £12 million. So that's not sustainable. The fees haven't gone up in real terms since 2009. I think there was a
Mm.
1% increase in 2012 and 2014, but I think the application fee was £251 in 2009.
Do you know why it's not gone up?
It's been government policy
Okay.
over that period. I think the current government is keen to change
Mm?
and to make the books balance. The issue we've got is trying to make it fairer. I think the application fee is probably okay, being the same for everybody, because the effort for an application for one isn't that much different to an application for 500.
But an operator won't see it like that. They'll
No,
they'll say, why should I, as a one-woman band or a one-man band, why should I pay the same as a really large organisation that's got a lot more money available?
well, as I say, I think because the work is basically the
Okay.
same. It's not that much different,
Okay.
What is, I think, more difficult to defend is the fact that the 5 yearly fee for the maintenance of the license is £401. The good thing about them not having changed in 15 years, it's easy to remember the figures. It's
I
£401.
like the 401.
It's 401. I don't know how we got to 401. So that's £80 a year, and that could be a fleet with 3,000 vehicles. It could be a fleet of one, and that doesn't seem right.
Mm.
At the same time, you have to bear in mind it is still, do the maths again, £80 a year,
It's nothing.
20p a day for an O
Nothing.
license. It's still nothing, but it does feel quite right. So we're looking at see if there are any ways that we could graduate that fee, but I'm not sure at the moment that there will be.
And who's we? Is this within your gift as a senior traffic commissioner, or is this for the Department for Transport?
It's three parties really. So it's us as traffic commissioners because the fees are collected in our name. Um, it's the Department for Transport who will make the legislation, and it's DVSA who account for the money. So the three of us need to work together to come up with a solution if we can.
Okay.
But something needs to happen to the fees because you can't carry on spending nearly
No,
twice what you earn.
no. I've done it successfully for a number of years, Kevin, and I'm having to stop. And the closer I get to retirement, but I get the point you're making. Can we just talk for a few moments about transport managers,
Yeah.
who, quite frankly, often have a thankless task, many challenges that they face. They've got this statutory responsibility. They've got to get over the hurdle of the CPC. Quick fire question: is the CPC fit for purpose in the 21st century? The exam.
The exam does not provide somebody with the competence and skills they need to be a transport manager. And I think, again, industry, that broad group again, part of transport, us, the operator associations are acknowledging that, and we're doing a piece of work jointly now to see what we can do about the exam. The syllabus is set in legislation, European legislation,
Yes.
which has been adopted. We're kind of stuck with that, but we're hoping that we can come up with some directions that can be provided by DFT to the exam providers to say focus your efforts in these particular areas, the ones that are relevant, not the ones that are about things that operators will rarely ever come across, such as a marketing plan or reading a balance sheet.
Yes, and there's a big emphasis on financial costings,
Yeah.
on finances generally, and there's some things like employment tribunals,
Mm,
marketing, all those things, types of organisation, which quite frankly they'll never use.
absolutely. Totally agree. There's stuff in there. I mean, I actually still don't know what promissory note is, but that's in the syllabus.
Mm. And contract law and all those sorts of
Yeah.
things.
Stuff that they don't need to know. And I think if you look at the legislation, there's like 54 bullet points that have to be covered in the syllabus, and only one of them is about managing maintenance of vehicles.
And of course, you've got different examining bodies,
Yeah.
not always consistent. So that's interesting to hear that you're working on that. So let's go back to our sort of hapless transport manager or our very eager new transport manager. They've got their UCPC, the ink's not quite dry. You've accepted them. You, as a traffic commissioner, not you, Kevin Rooney, have accepted them to go onto the licence and be nominated as the responsible person, transport manager. Um, what advice would you give them? And what would you expect from the new transport managers?
I would say to them, you need to go and get a mentor, somebody to help you to do this. Don't necessarily follow on if it's from your in your own business. If you don't know that what's been going on is good.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, so and so is going to teach me, and he's been
yeah,
doing it wrong for 20 years.
exactly. You need to be a little bit careful in that, but that's probably better than nothing. But you need to be a bit wary of that. But you you can get a mentor. You can talk to a transport consultant. You can provide mentoring services for your first 6 months or something. Come in and talk to you for half a day every month, and actually help you work transition from passing an exam to being able to manage a transport operation. It's a bit like driving a car, isn't it? You learn to drive, but you take the L plates off. You're not a safe driver at that point. You've still got an awful lot of learning to do, and you'll carry on learning. But in that first 6 months, I recommend any transport manager to get a mentor.
And that's a recommendation,
Yeah,
slightly different from a requirement.
indeed.
Okay. What about membership of professional bodies, trade associations? Do they have their
Yeah, I
part to
think they
play as well?
absolutely do. Yeah, yeah. And there's two sides of it. One of it is you should learn a lot from it because you'll get told and kept up to date with industry, and you've got somebody to go and talk to, and it provides a network of people. So even if you're not paying for a mentor, you other people to talk about your job. But actually, when you're coming here saying, well, I want to go from 10 vehicles to 100 vehicles, and we're looking at it, and you can say you're a member of a professional association, that actually shows that you take your job seriously.
Mm. The reality is most people don't go from 10 to 100. They might go 10, then 20, then
Yeah,
40, then 60.
yeah.
What about those at the other end of the scale? Those transport managers, you and I have met them, Kevin, in various guises over the years, in various capacities, who are really, really lovely people, but they might be a little bit 20th century or a little bit 19th century. How do you, what advice do you give to them? Because they still feel they have their part to play.
They do, and they may well have a part to play, but one of the most difficult conversations I have with operators in this room is about retirement and
Mm.
moving on and letting. I mean, I still very clear picture in my mind having a conversation with people that sat the other side of this table that we're sat at, and there was the father and the two sons. And I said to the father, "Isn't it time you let them have a go now?" And he said, "Oh, they're not ready yet. They're not ready yet, the lads." And the lads were 58 and 56. And, and I had to think, if they're not ready yet,
Well, how
when
old
are
was he?
he was in his 80s. Yeah, but the lads weren't ready yet. They've only been in the business 40 years. Obviously, it hadn't gone that well for him because he was at Public Inquiry as operator and transport manager. So that's a really difficult
So how did you deal
conversation.
with him?
I honestly can't remember. Normally, as I'm sure you'll recall, I would give somebody a choice of resigning, retiring at that point
Gracefully,
gracefully.
reflecting their many years of excellent service.
Absolutely. But they wouldn't carry on if they decide that they want to carry on. Then I have actually disqualified them, which is harsh because you have to start by taking away their good repute, which somebody doesn't understand when they've been in the industry for 70 years. They think it means that they're bad people.
Yes, and they're not.
But they're not. They're just no longer relevant or they haven't kept up to date with modern systems.
You can't wave the act at them and go, "There's no exemption here for being a nice man or a
No,
nice woman."
no,
Not that
there
we
isn't.
wave a physical paper act
No.
anymore at anybody. So, and then the 58-year-old and the 55-year-old or however old they
Mm.
are, actually they're at the other end of the scale.
Well, yeah,
It's the 30-year-olds that we need to bring in
absolutely. Yeah.
and develop and grow and all those sorts of things. What in just before we leave the transport managers, what's the one piece of advice you would give to any transport manager, whether they're newly qualified or they've been around for a long time? What's the one piece of advice you would give to them?
Um, First of all, I'd say to them they're very brave because they're putting
Mm,
their qualification at risk every day of the week. I would say that, you know, once a year or something, get somebody external to come in and audit your systems. Whether that's a trade association, it's a formal audit report, or whether it's something, if it's a small business, more informal. Get
or consultants
or a
who do
consultant.
audits,
Indeed. Yeah.
provided they comply with the audit requirements. Can I just, before you finish that answer, just ask you quickly? A lot of traffic commissioners are now asking for DVSA earned recognition quality audits or style audits.
Yeah, no, there's been a bit of miscommunication in the wording that's used in standard audits that have been attached to applications, generally speaking, and that's been clarified now. We're not after own recognition style audits. We've published our audit framework online,
Yeah.
which talks about sample sizes and talks about the areas we want to cover. But the reference to earned recognition, I think what's happened somewhere along the way is that an operator has offered that as an undertaking freely
Mm.
and it's been recorded, and then somehow that's got carried on.
This will be a good idea for everybody.
Yeah, but that shouldn't be happening anymore.
Okay. Sorry to cut across you,
No,
but
that's
just
fine.
before I forgot. So going back to the advice to transport managers, have an audit, have an external pair of eyes once a year.
Yeah, I think once a year's good enough.
Okay.
As long as, well, it depends what they find. If they find everything's awful, then
Yeah.
probably you need a bit more effort in. But assuming that they come along and find that everything's reasonably
Yeah.
decent, reasonably good, we
Okay.
never expect perfection. But it's
No,
just things that
it's not. Yeah. Okay. And then any other advice you give them?
keep learning. So you
Mm.
need to do continuous professional development, and whether that's a 2-day refresher every 5 years, or whether it's a day a year, or attending, trade association events, or seminars, or webinars, or whatever. You keep a log of your training and development,
Yes.
um, and make sure that you probably aim for that at least 2 days. Your drivers need to do 5 days in 5 years. So transport managers should probably be
Mm.
looking at trying to aim to do that.
Okay. Can I just ask you something completely different
Mm.
now around operator licensing? Um, it seems to me that forever, transport managers have always, traffic commissioners have always been concerned about fronting
Yeah,
and about, as a separate issue, and about companies that have a history of going under and then applying again
yeah.
for new licenses. So you've got that end of the scale, which is the seriously non-compliant, the deliberate
Mm,
failure to comply. The other end of the scale, it's a tough world out there. You know the margins for
yeah.
good, honest operators because this drive to the bottom where they all compete and go, "Well, I'll do it cheaper." So the margins are tiny. Something can go horribly wrong. A major customer can go bust
Mm.
and they end up going bust themselves. How do you, or how will you, in your new role as senior, ensure that the staff get that balance right by focusing on the non-compliant that are deliberate and the ones that are innocent victims of something that's not their fault?
Yeah. So when a company goes into administration or liquidation, there's usually, something called a statement of
Yeah, yeah.
affairs, which shows who's owed what and when. And it's usually quite starkly obvious from that whether that position has been manufactured or whether it's happened naturally. So you've lost your big customer, they've gone broke,
Mm,
you've got no income, you've got a whole load of bills to pay. At that point, you know you're insolvent. The business must stop trading.
Mm,
And if you do that, you freeze any business in real time. Probably they'll be owing to the taxman one way or another, somewhere between 10 and 50%, something like that. Depends on how your VAT payments fall due
mm.
and the like. What is starkly obvious is when the only money that's left owed is to the taxman, because at that point it seems more likely than not that somebody has manufactured a situation where they have paid off all the people they need for their new business, so their tyre suppliers, their,
Mm.
fuel companies, the staff, whoever it is they need to get the new business running. They've all been kept sweet, and me and you as taxpayers are left here carrying the can, and that's what we look at. Does it look like they've acted appropriately once they've realised they're insolvent and treated everybody fairly?
So there is that assessment before a decision's made
Yeah.
to call to PI. Okay, and that's really helpful to know because obviously the focus has to be right, and the industry would want that as
Mm.
well. I could literally talk to you all day, as you know, but I know you're a very busy person, so I'll ask you sort of a last question, really. And I'm going to use the example of Doug the driver. Okay,
My mate Doug.
your
Yeah.
your mate Doug, and I know you spoke recently at the RT Expo conference.
Mm.
Um, and we talk about drivers as this amorphous mass. I think you and I have been going on for years about the mental health and well-being of drivers, the physical health and well-being of drivers. And we were talking about transport managers. What's that link between transport manager and the driver in terms of reducing risk? And is there any place for Swiss cheese in it?
There's always a place for Swiss cheese. Um, so the link is really the transport manager is responsible, it says in the legislation, for assigning drivers and loads to vehicles and operation. And if you're going to send somebody out to do a particular shift, you need to know not only that they're legal, but what's behind them, what their personal circumstances are. So I might turn up for work in the morning. I'm a bit old now, but 40 years ago, I might have been up all night with the kids. I've had my break, but am I
Mm,
rested?
yeah.
No, not at all. So I'll talk a bit about Doug and Swiss cheese. So you might come across as completely mad, I guess. But I wanted something. I was at a launch of a campaign last week at RTX in relation to reducing bridge strikes.
Mm.
Um, and I only had 5 minutes to talk, which, as you know, isn't very long for me. I like to
No.
carry on for days. So I spoke to my wife the night before. I said, I've got 5 minutes. What do I say? And
This is your wife who's a
my
psychologist.
wife, who's a psychologist, yes. And she said, just talk about Swiss cheese. God, she's gone mad. She's gone mad. Um, But then we talked about it. So, Swiss cheese theory is a risk management theory, and created by a guy called James Reason back in 1990 in a book called Human Error, which is all about why catastrophes happen. Um, and if we talk about bridge strikes now, because that's the example I used last week, each layer of Swiss cheese, so Swiss cheese has got lots of holes in it.
Mm.
Each layer is a risk control. So, in terms of bridge strikes, you've got things like a risk assessed route, which we expect operators to give drivers, height markers set to the correct height in the cab, a headboard marked in feet and inches, not in metric, a well-rested driver, a running height on the unit. One thing I love to see is it says on the headboard 4.5 meters or the 1.25 meter fifth wheel. You look at the tractor unit, no idea
Mm.
how high it is. Never says. They might have technology. There's some very clever technology, bridge strike. They might have an HGV sat nav sat to the right height. They're all
Let's hope
risk
they have an
controls.
HGV sat nav rather than a Google Maps.
Google Maps, very popular, I
Mm.
find.
Mm.
They're all your layers of Swiss cheese. So let's come back to Doug. It's not his real name, but there's a guy I met in this room just at the beginning of this year, I think. Really nice guy. And he turned up, it's worth saying, with his boss. They drove up together from Southampton and they got on well, clearly had a good relationship. Um, he'd asked for a day off work to take his wife to her first follow up after some very serious cancer treatment.
Mm.
Um, and his boss initially agreed. But then he couldn't find another driver to cover the job. And he's relied, he was operating about half a dozen vehicles, something like that. And he had one main customer. and he didn't want to let him down. The customer was very insistent that he had a job that needed doing
Mm.
that day. He couldn't find another driver, so the boss called Doug back and said, "You're stuck. What can you do?" Doug, he was actually on a 0 hours contract. He's sort of semi-retired, really. And he said, "All right, well, I'll do a local run, so long as I can be back at the hospital in Southampton for about 9:30, 10 in the morning."
Poor Doug.
Um, and then he turned up on the day, and he picked up a box on the back, container on the back of the truck. And the jobs weren't allocated by the company, his employer. The jobs were allocated by the customer to the vehicles. So a breakdown there already in the transport manager control. And he picked up the paperwork, looked at the box on the back, looked at the paperwork, and says, "Going to Northampton."
Oh no.
So he's like, "Well, there's no way I can get to Northampton and back in 3 hours." Now, on top of that, the company had this policy, which on the face of it, I can see the logic behind, but it was to set all the height markers in the track, in the cabs to 14'6", because that's the highest they'd ever run at.
Mm.
Now, unfortunately, the drivers knew that most of the containers they had on the back weren't 14'6", but they weren't marked. This one particular one just said "caution, high load," but there was no height on it. Obviously, you can't, because it's a container, it doesn't know what trailer it's going to be on. So he looked at the container he had on the back. He said, "That's not 14'6". He didn't know what it was. And to get up the road, he could come out of his operating centre and go left. He'd have to go all the way around the town, and it had about 20 minutes onto his journey, or he could turn right and go underneath the bridge. He'd gone under countless times before, and he turned right, and he thought he'd fit under the bridge,
And he didn't.
and he didn't. And he put the vehicle on its side. And it got even worse for the company because it had already been called to public inquiry, and it was being recalled on finances. And the recovery for that vehicle cost them £18,000.
18,000.
Yeah, and they hadn't got any insurance money back by the time they came to PI. So Doug was in a position he shouldn't have been in. He shouldn't have been asked to work that day. Once he was in that position, he didn't think he could let his boss down because he knew the company was in trouble. He knew
I
it was coming
like
to
Doug.
PI. I loved him. I thought he was a lovely guy. I didn't take any action against him.
Good.
Because he shouldn't have been asked. He shouldn't have been put in that. But all the bits of it all went wrong when all the Swiss cheeses all lined up, and there was a big hole straight through the middle, and there went Doug. Unfortunately, didn't fit.
Dare I ask what you did with the operator?
Um,
Or in a way, it doesn't matter. Maybe.
well,
Go
it
on.
does really, because it's that final layer of Swiss cheese for
Mm.
the operator, because he'd already been called to PI. He turns up to PI. He's got no money left in the bank account.
Did you give him a period of
He'd
grace?
had a period of grace.
Oh,
As you know, you can only have the
yeah.
one. Another layer of Swiss cheese lined up for him. So revocation is mandatory. And they were nice people.
Yes.
All of them nice people.
And when I say it doesn't matter, I don't mean it as in it doesn't matter what
No.
you do as a regulator.
No.
In a way, all the damage is already done.
Yeah.
And it's a catastrophic chain of events. That's a really good example, I think, of a real life case, because we've talked in quite sort of general terms
Mm.
of how it can impact. So, what would your advice have been to the company and to Doug?
Well, I think transport manager had a part to play here, because he had no role in allocating drivers to loads,
Mm,
which is a basic requirement.
mm,
He was quite recently into the business and had done a lot of good stuff. So on the balancing exercise, which we carry out, I didn't take any action against him other than a warning. But he should have had control over who was driving that vehicle that day, and he should have known what the driver's personal circumstances were. There were only, say, a handful of drivers, really.
mm.
No reason the transport manager shouldn't know what their circumstances were. Um, so, and that's what the transport manager needs to do. They need to know what's in that guy's
Mm.
mind that morning when he's
Yes.
driving up the road.
Because it's managing the people,
Yeah.
and leadership and management isn't often dealt with well, it's certainly dealt with in the
No.
CPC. We cover it in our training, which is different. So yes, that's interesting. So Kevin, that's been fascinating. You and I think could talk literally for all
Yeah,
day,
we
but
could.
you're very busy. Just before we finish, we do give, and it's not compulsory, it's voluntary. We do give people the opportunity, if they want to ask me a question. Turning the tables, we call it. You don't have to. Is there anything you want to
Well,
ask
as
me?
a
I'm
former senior traffic
slightly
commissioner,
trepidatious.
What advice would you give to somebody new in the role?
I would say I don't I would say remember that most of the industry, you know this, so I don't need to give you any advice. Most of the industry does a fabulous job day in, day out. And Joan calls it, doesn't she? The invisibility of success. You only get to hear about the bad cases. There was a case this week, wasn't there, where a young girl was killed by a bus driven. She was killed by the driver who drove the bus when under the influence of cannabis. They make the news. Thank goodness there aren't many of those. I wouldn't be presumptuous to give you advice, but I would ask you to think about listening to the industry and listening to what they want out of their regulators, not their enforcement agencies because they're different, but what do the industry want? And also be your own man and set your standards. But you'll do that, Kevin, obviously. In a final piece of advice, which is much more personal, enjoy it because it's a difficult job, challenging, but I think it's a great job. And I wish you every success.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. It's been a delight to talk to.
As we conclude another fascinating journey through the world of transport and logistics, we want to express our sincere appreciation for listening. Your support means the world to us. Keep the conversation going by reaching out on social media with your questions and feedback. We're eager to hear from you and continue exploring together. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and check out our other episodes online. Take care on the roads and see you in the next episode.